Thank you for joining another Quintessential podcast. I'm your host, Renee Barron, certified hypnotherapist. Today, I have a great show lined up for you and a much needed discussion on epigenetics and how it does relate to trauma. I have been away, haven't been having the podcast. I've been sick, so I'm just back up and running. So thank you for bearing with me and joining us here today. Now, feel free to ask questions. We will have a little bit of audience participation if you would like to join us. Also, please like and share the video so we can have a lot more engagement. And then if you're joining us on the replay, go ahead and let us know how you like the show. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask those. So today we have the lovely Wanda Whitaker with us. She is originally from Washington, D.C. She is a humanitarian, healer, artist, author, and illustrator. Wanda believes that the best relationship of all is the one you have with yourself. And I have to agree. She is a certified hypnotherapist. She's a visionary artist and transformation life coach. She currently spends her time working with individuals and groups on changing beliefs and bad habits that are not serving them, conducting workshops on self-awareness, personal growth, and development, creating art that educates and advocates and helps guide others to lead a more holistic lifestyle with spiritual practices. So without further ado, I'm going to bring her in and welcome. Welcome, Wanda. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're very overjoyed to have you. Now, before we get into the topic, can you tell us how you got into this journey of the hypnotherapy field?
Well, it was very interesting because I was led into this journey. Actually, I have a marketing background. I went to school, graduated in communications and art, radio, television, and film from the University of Maryland. However, I was also an art studio major. And so I had many years of marketing, starting out in television and radio. And then I started my own consulting agency and did that for almost 30 years. And then, I went through a transition stage when I went through a divorce. And that's when I decided, well, what do I really want to do? What do I really want to do? What's my purpose in life? I kept asking myself these questions, and I went on a spiritual journey. Who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose for being here? And I just came up with the idea of, you know what? I'm here to help people heal themselves. And I'm here to empower them so that they can reach their greatest potential. And I do that through hypnosis, through my art, and also through other modalities. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got started. And I went to the Palo Alto School of Hypnotherapy in Palo Alto, California. And that was magical, too, because, this is how spirit works. You just have different incidences and just things start happening to you magically. And so what happened is I went to a New Age festival or expo here in San Francisco. And I went to a particular booth that a friend of mine was at. And she asked me, well, Wanda, the Palo Alto School of Hypnotherapy has a space up on the next floor. You should go there because they're pulling names and they're going to give away some free classes. And I had not thought about hypnosis or hypnotherapy, but I said, well, why not? Why don't I go up there and put my card in the little basket or whatever? And I put my card in the basket. And 2 months later, guess what? They called on me. They called me for classes. So that's how I initially got started. And then just by exploring and taking so many different classes, I decided this is where I wanted to be and opened up an office in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
So that led me to hypnosis, and that's how I got started.
Well, I have to say you have a beautiful voice. So you have the perfect radio hypnotherapy voice that a person can have. So what other modalities do you practice?
Well, I practice tapping, and also I practice Reiki. Those are the two other modalities that I practice.
So today we're going to talk about epigenetics and how it's tied into trauma and all of this. So why don't we go ahead and talk about that? Can you explain a little bit more about epigenetics?
Well, we can't talk about epigenetics unless we know a little bit about DNA, because that's where the term epigenetics comes from. Can I share my screen?
Oh, okay, sure. 1 second here. Go ahead there.
Can you see that?
Yep. Yep. You just have to do the show.
Okay, great. All right. So this particular slideshow is just going to give you a better understanding of epigenetics. So let's look at nature versus nurture. We come from an education that says that our genes, our physical features are inherited from our ancestral lineage. Not only are our physical features inherited, but we also things can happen to us from the environment. So there's always this theory of nature versus nurture. And nature meaning the DNA and the genes versus nurture meaning the environment. But if you take the case of twins, identical twins, they can have the same genes and grow up in the same environment, but they can also have emotional and health differences. For example, one twin can be bipolar or have asthma. So that is when epigenetics comes in. Now, if you look at the cell, the community of cell, we're made up of trillions of cells, probably about 50 trillion cells, and they're performing all kinds of biochemical reactions each second, and each one of them perform in the right order, the right time for the body to function properly. So let's look at DNA. DNA is in every cell of the body. Every cell is in the nucleus of the body, however, except in, I believe, red blood cells. So if you look at DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, it's a polymer of nucleic acids. Actually, it's a macromolecule that carries genetic information used in the growth and development and functioning of all living organisms and many viruses. So it is made up of 4 nitrogen nucleic bases, ACTG, adenine, cytosine, thymine, and guanine, and also a sugar called deoxyribose and a phosphate group. Like I said, it's located in every cell of the body. And if you were to pull DNA out of every cell of the body or one cell of the body, it would be as tall as you. That's how long it is in length. There are 46 chromosomes, 23 from your mother, 23 come from your father. And these chromosomes contain all of the instructions to build every living thing. Sometimes we call it the secret of life. But it's important to note that only 10% of the DNA codes for proteins. So let's look at DNA. It's a macromolecule. So as I said, how can all of that material, the length of the body, be packaged in the nucleus of a cell? Well, what happens is they wrap around like a double helix, but they wrap around these, what we call histones. And as you can see by this slide, they're like little spoons, right? And they wrap around these spoons and they wrap into what we call chromatin, which makes up chromosomes. And all the genes are stored inside this chromatin. This is just a chromosome chart. You guys are going to learn a little bit of science. And that just shows you that the last chromosome is either XX or XY, meaning it's going to be a boy or girl. These are the genes that are wrapped up into the chromosomes, into the histines. And so this is what that looks like. So let's look at the nucleus. Okay, so the nucleus contains almost all the DNA within a cell. And when you remove the genes from the cell can live 3 to 4 months. Okay, now it's out of the nucleus, but the cell still lives. That's very important. At the University of Wisconsin in the early 1970s, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who was a cell biologist, cloned a stem cell, and it was an embryonic cell, and it divided until he had about 50,000 cells in one petri dish. All the cells were genetically identical. He split them up into 3 different petri dishes and chemically changed the culture. All right. Changing the environment changed the culture between the 3 dishes. Each dish had a different environment, and in one environment, cells formed muscles, and the second was a bone cell. The third were fat cells. What controlled the fate of the cells was the environment. So there were environmental signals that are selecting and controlling gene expression. So the cell can function without the nucleus, which contains the DNA. And when the nucleus is removed, the cell continues with all of its life functions, and it can still recognize toxins and nutrients. So what are the environmental factors that control the expression of the genes? because remember, they're wrapped up into this chromatin, and everybody has the same DNA, the same genes. And so what causes them to be expressed? Well, some say there's an invisible energy field that surrounds the DNA. There's also stress factors, diet, environmental poisons, and emotional upsets that can change the chemistry of the DNA and actualize the cells or the genes. So environmental signals control genes. So genes do not control your life, people. We are not victims of our heredity. We control our environment, and we can change our beliefs, attitudes, and perceptions that lead to the chemical changes in the blood that ultimately control our genetics. Before, we believed that genes controlled our lives, and we were taught that they turn on and off. But it's really just a blueprint to make proteins, the building blocks of the body, that give us our physical and behavioral characteristics. They make the parts, the proteins. So how we think turns into chemistry that control our genes, and our beliefs control our lives. We have blamed genes, but less than 1% are connected to genetics. The biggest cause of disease is stress that can turn the gene into a mutant gene and express itself as a disease. So that's what we mean by epigenetics. It means literally, Greek means above. So it's the environment above the genes that's causing the expression of the genes. Sometimes we have to make lifestyle changes. Less than 1% of disease is connected to genetics, and 75 to 95% of all physician office visits are for stress-related illnesses. So how are we living in a stressful world? Here's one example. Dean Ornish worked with prostate cancer patients, and he split them up into two groups. One, pharmaceutical drugs were given to them, and the second used no drugs. They changed diet, taught them stress reduction techniques, and taught them how to meditate. And compared after 90 days, found 500 genes changed by changing lifestyle and removing stress. And most of the genes were related to prostate cancer. It's unbelievable. So there is a genetic memory. Some people know things they never learned. Like, for example, you see this little boy, he's playing a piano, and he's actually very, very good at it. Well, he's probably about 3 or 4 years old. Where did this information and this talent come from? There must be some type of genetic memory. So Nikola Tesla, who I love, he said, one of his most famous quotes is, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. There's also messages in water. Dr. Emoto, a lot of people have heard of him because if you've studied any type of biology, particularly from a spiritual perspective, you will know about Dr. Emoto and the experience and experiments he did. He was actually, there was a segment on him in The Secret, and it was great. But what he did was he actually studied the crystals in waters, and he came up with a philosophy, a hypothesis, that it depended on the environment how the crystals reacted. And when they were exposed to heavy metal music, you see what the crystals turned into. If you were to talk to the water and say, you make me sick, I'm going to kill you, you see what the image indicates. And then if you think about Adolf Hitler, just looking in water with intention, this is what happened with the water. Now, when you think differently, when you think more positively, in terms of gratitude, and you're saying thank you, you're appreciating everyone, and you're thinking about loving, you're having loving thoughts, then this is what is expressed in the water. You see the beautiful crystals. And here's another one, Mother Teresa. And when they thought about, these researchers thought about Mother Teresa, this is how the water crystals looked. And if you think about it, we are made up of 75% water. So just imagine how your thoughts are impacting your body, your biology. Here's another Russian molecular biologist, and I cannot pronounce this man's name. I'm not going to try to, but one can use words and sentences of the human language to talk to your DNA. You can actually talk to your DNA, and living DNA substance will always react to language modulated laser rays and even radio waves if the proper frequencies are being used. Our DNA reacts to language and can be programmed by language, words, and thoughts. And this is why affirmations and hypnosis can have strong effects on humans and the body. This is an author of a book called Molecules of Emotion, and your body is your subconscious mind. I would recommend people reading that book. So, in Molecules of Emotions, Candace Perk, who was the author, recognized that chemical process triggers our mood. And she shows in the book how mind and body are the same, and they're receptor molecules on top of our cells. Chemical substances such as hormones and endorphins, first found in the brain, are now known to be everywhere in the body, in the blood, muscles, bones, etc. And when they bond with their receptors, neuropeptides go into cells of the body and create a physical state. So the emotions are the bridge between mind and matter. They are vibration and happy simultaneously all over your body. Your mind is in every cell of the body. And if you have any comments to make, Renee, please, as I'm moving through these slides, please make them comments or questions, okay?
Okay, I certainly will. And if the audience has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and then we will address it.
Okay, so biochemical messengers, neuropeptides and their receptors. They manifest as emotions, beliefs, and expectations. They profoundly influence our responses and experiences in the world. Unite mind, spirit, and emotions with the physical body, and there's a biochemical base of awareness and consciousness. And this is Dr. Pert, Molecules of Emotions. So what does that say about us? Okay, it's very interesting because a lot of people talk about trauma, particularly in the African American community. And there were hundreds and millions of people, children of Holocaust survivors who have suffered also. And they've suffered from the same emotions and traumas that their ancestors have suffered. Because, Go ahead. You have a question?
That brings up a point, though, because, you know, you have people living today and say, I've never met my 6-time ancestor or my ancestor from thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago. Why does that matter? How can that be affecting me? I've never even met them. So I think you're getting ready to explain that.
Yeah, because there's a memory. There's a memory in the genes, and that memory has been passed down to you through the DNA and through the genes. So if your ancestors have experienced any type of trauma, that drama can be experienced by you, or that feeling of that trauma can be experienced by you because of your environment. It can actually be triggered in you. Let's say, for example, you experienced a lot of whipping as a slave, and that tradition has been passed down through our ancestors who are continuously whipping us. You can also have that feeling that a slave had, right? When you see a whip, just noticing a whip in the background of something can trigger you with the feeling of fright, of fear, of horror. So
Right.
that's crazy, but that can happen.
Well, we have this here in Minnesota. We have this runaway railroad where people go through the process of slaves fleeing and what that was like, and you have so many people coming up with these trauma responses. What people don't realize, you may not think you have the trauma responses, but they're there, they're encoded, and they're dormant until you face a situation that's similar to what your ancestor went through. And I mean, you can just go through your lifetime just going through scenarios that you've experienced, and you wonder, why did I react that way? It's a trauma response. And I don't know, I like to tell stories. I'm going to give you an example of me. Now, how it showed up in me, because we moved to an area, I was in an all-white school. This was an all-white neighborhood. And previously, before that, we're from Gary, Indiana. You just saw Black people and Puerto Rican people. And everyone at my school would have been Black, or Puerto Rican. So I'm here in this all-white area, total culture shock. And so I'm on the playground on my first day of school, and these two white boys come up to me trying to confront me with racial slurs. And my fight, flight, or freeze response, I didn't freeze. I had a fight response. So I started just punching these boys out. I was a tomboy already. I was beating them, and I just automatically went in it. And I was a very quiet person. As a child, I did not talk much. I was very introverted. But that was my trauma response. And I laid into them right away. So that's like, it was dormant, but my first response was to fight. So that's just an example.
That's a very good example. Sometimes what happens with us is there is that memory, that fright memory that's within us, and it can come from our ancestors.
Yeah, I would say, and another one. I just have to give you one more, because, okay, how I went to college at the U of M, and certain departments or classes that you'll take in these different departments can be very racist. And so my goal taking the class, I said, I'm not going to comment much. I'm just going to get through this class, do my homework. I'm not going to make waves. I'm just going to get through this class. My ancestors would not let me just sit there and take it. I would fight and wrestle with myself. The whole class, I'd be arguing back and forth with the professor. And I would be on point, and they would be so mad at me. And that, I didn't want to even do that, because you get labeled as a troublemaker. And I was trying to get through and keep my 4.0 GPA. And I'm having words with the professor because what they're saying is inaccurate and incorrect. And so that's another thing that I had to deal with. So it's a trauma response.
Yeah, and it can also go back to past lives as well.
Yeah, that is true.
There's a guy by Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. He talks about there's a morphogenetic field that's outside of the DNA that's there that forms everything. And that morphogenetic field also stores all the memory of, and that goes back to the subconscious mind, storing all of the memory from not just your present lifetime, but your past lives as well. It's very interesting because these things are invisible, and doctors don't take any of this into consideration. But when you look at certain organs in the body, such as if something happens with your lungs, sometimes that has a lot to do with grief. And people who are experiencing grief can have some type of lung disease. There's so many parts of the body. The liver has to do with anger. So it's not just the physical things, it's the emotional things that can create the physical damages and the imbalances in our bodies. And each organ is a certain vibration as well. So when you start studying energy, you can very much understand what's going on with your physical body. So, what can I say? But look at the children of Holocaust survivors. I think there was a study done in New York City with Holocaust victims. I think it was a 2015 study. And what they found from the children of the Holocaust was that there were some epigenetic changes in their levels of cortisol. And that's the hormone involved with the stress response. And they found these markers in their children, and they concluded that both parents and unborn children were affected on a genetic level. So if you come from, and many of us do, come from an ancestral background where there's violence or where there has been a lot of trauma, you can definitely be impacted by that trauma. Even if you're an embryo in the fetus, you can be affected by the trauma that the mother is experiencing, even what she's eating. This is, think about this, your ancestors just being in the hot sun, picking cotton, and this is the only thing they could do. Now, in order for them to survive, they had to have a certain kind of belief in order to survive that they adapted to.
Yeah.
Right? But what's so terrible now is that these things have been passed down to us, but we're not in any cotton fields anymore. So, or we're not being beaten like we were before. However, if that is within our DNA, sometimes we can just create chaos because we're so used to it, and that normalizes us. So life can be just going around just wonderfully, and all of a sudden it's too wonderful. Nope, I got to create some chaos, and we do that because that's all we know, and that's what's in our DNA.
So we have a comment from North Black. Is that why it is said that you are what you think?
Yes. And the Egyptians said, everything is mental. You are so right. You are what you believe. And a belief is the thought that you think over and over and over again. And some of those beliefs don't serve us. Like some of the beliefs that are coming from our ancestors, they don't serve us. And they prevent us from having the life that we truly want.
That brings me to my next question, though. And I want to ask you, Wanda, why should people stop avoiding dealing with trauma? Because, we're afraid that it's going to be too much for us. And why would you say they need to deal with it and be proactive with recovering from it?
Because it's just a continuous cycle. When you don't take care of your trauma, it's going to continue to show up in your life. It's going to continue. It's like over and over and over again. And when you actually deal with that trauma and change those beliefs and change that trauma, your life will begin to blossom. You'll begin to live differently, and attract different people to you that are more in line with who you are and where you are wanting to grow and go. So it is very important, because trauma also has an effect on the body, the physical body. That's what, I always wondered why statistically African Americans have more, or suffer more from diabetes and heart attacks and these things of that nature. Man, our stress level is huge.
It is. And it's shortening the lifespan. But one thing I like to say is that it's not enough to be trauma informed. We need to be trauma responsive. And because we're not our authentic self, the behaviors and the personality and you think you have is really not who we truly are. So we have to get under all of those layers from our ancestors, so we can be who we truly are and what we're meant to do. And I think the best thing you can do for our future children and grandchildren is to make room for growth in our nervous system, so that our descendants can live a better life and they can have a chance at emotional health and wellness and have a healthy DNA, like you were saying. Otherwise, when we fail to address that trauma, our trauma, we pass these fears on to our future generations. And we give them the pain and the constriction and that's why many people have labeled trauma as family curse. And it really isn't a curse, because it's a protective mechanism to protect you and help you deal with the trauma. It really isn't a curse. But yeah, I just wanted to add that. Thank you so much for responding.
Oh, no problem. So you can look at DNA as a storybook, right? 23 chapters come from your mother, and 23 chapters come from your father. Okay, so I put this particular slide up here because I want to talk about a case of a client who was suffering from asthma. And his mother, he's like 16 years old. His mother brought him in and said, well, she didn't know what was going on with him, because he had never suffered from asthma before. And, how could this happen? Well, all of a sudden, after seeing, this fire in this wheat field, I asked about the person's, anybody in the family dying in a wheat field. And the response, the kid said no, he didn't remember anything about that. And the mother said no, she didn't. But after going home, she thought about it, and her grandfather had died in the wheat field. And so every time the person who was 16 when that happened to his grandfather was eating wheat, he started eating wheat, then he would have these asthmatic feelings, these symptoms. So after clearing that, he was able to eat wheat again.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting.
Okay, now let's see. I can review. I'm going to review this slide, and then Wanda's going to take a quick break. She'll be right back with us.
Okay, thank you.
So she has some books that she wants us to read, and one by Margaret Ruby, The DNA of Healing, a 5-step process for total wellness and abundance. Because again, ancestral trauma can affect your abundance, your ability to acquire it. The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. She mentioned it earlier in that slide. And then The Body Keeps the Score. This is something you got to read that book by Bessel A. van der Kolk. Anyone that has gone through any experience like trauma, you will need to read that. And then What Happened to You? Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing by Bruce D. Perry. And then lastly, Molecules of Emotions by Candace Perk. So be sure to pick up those books. And Wanda is back.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I can stop sharing this and come back to you.
Okay. So thank you for that. So we know a little bit about how we got the trauma from our ancestors. Now, then what are some things we can do to recover from this and change our subconscious programming that we've inherited from our ancestors?
Well, you and I both know, Renee, that hypnosis or hypnotherapy is one of the wonderful things that you can do. And the good thing about it, you can heal yourself, but it's good to go to a therapist who can help you because a lot of times it's not as easy as you think it is. I know I have some clients who have actually tried on their own to do things. And I give them instructions. I do, because I want people to actually heal on their own as well. But in a lot of cases, what happens with people is they don't do the work. And it requires work. It requires work. If you're not capable of doing the work, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, my clients have had fantastic results when they listened to me and did the work. I've had people with PSTD, other issues, some major issues they've had their whole life long in just a few weeks, simply for following my instructions. So it's work on your part. A good hypnotherapist will give you the tools to do the work on your own, but it's important to have that professional guidance so that you're successful, like you were saying. Because one thing about trauma and the subconscious mind, as soon as the body, a trauma survivor, the body of a trauma survivor begins to feel joy, if you haven't done the work, guess what? The body signals this is a danger, because the creation of your life has been from the trauma, from ancestral trauma. So it's going to trigger all of these trauma responses. So it's like that's why some people give up. And I'm saying to you, don't give up. Just work with someone that can give you the tools to work through it.
It's interesting. They did a study on a rat once and put a rat in a box with the electrodes on top of the box. And so every time the rat would move, right, and hit the electrodes, it would get electrocuted every time. So then they took the rat and put it in another box. It didn't have any electrodes, right? It was right adjacent to the other box. Guess what the rat did? Now, there were no electrodes. It was rat. The rat went back into the box with the electrode because that's what it was used to.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how people do over and over with their lives. It's comfortable for them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Wanda, you do something with numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there was a process that was developed by a woman named Margaret Ruby that I studied under. And she used a numerical mapping process to identify emotions that were causing issues. And the numbers also indicate what happened to your ancestors that are the cause of you experiencing whatever the issue is. Not only that, the numbers can go into past lives. The numbers can go into the emotions that are causing like a physical ailment. So yeah, it's very powerful because when you know these things, then you can really start to understand, okay, this is why this is happening to me. And I can't do it with my conscious mind. Consciously, sometimes we know stuff, but the subconscious is ruling us, like
Yeah.
right 90% of the time is this
Yeah,
subconscious.
90%. It's powerful. So it's hard to fight your cognitive mind. You need some help.
And then from what 0 to 5, 0 to 7 is when that your mind is really picking up everything, all of the data,
Yeah.
because right, it's that
0 to 8 or 7. It's
yeah,
different stuff.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
because of the
yeah.
brain. It's either it's delta when you're coming in. That's why babies sleep a lot, which is a very, very slow wavelength. And then as the baby gets older, it begins to the wavelengths get a little bit longer. But when they're slow like that, that is between delta and alpha, and that's when everything, all the programming is downloaded.
Mhm.
So you are who you are now. If you can remember between the ages of 1 and 8, and it can go on to 21 because really that beta doesn't really hit in until you're about that age. So you're picking up all that programming, which is very interesting.
North Black said that was very informative. Now, we want to, if we have people in the audience that would like to participate so that Wanda can demonstrate the numbers and how it can work for you. If you'd be happy to share, go ahead and comment in the chat that you'd like to participate, and then she will demonstrate this technique of hers with you.
So all one has to do is give me an issue. It could be physical or it could be emotional, and we can find out the theme of that issue and where it's actually being stored in the body, and also we'll identify the ancestral lineage and where that came from, what caused your ancestors to pass it on to you, and you are experiencing it today. We can also point out your greatest fear. Like I said, it can be emotional or physical issue.
Yep. If you want to try it, go ahead. Also, I wanted to let you guys know, we mentioned it earlier, but Wanda is an author. She's a published author. And I wanted to share a couple of her books. I have this one right here. Angels and Spirit Guides. It's an activity and coloring book from age 5 and up. I mean, you can use it as an adult coloring book, but it's very informative. Like, she talks about the different roles and things. Can you describe this a little bit, Wanda?
Yeah, it's actually an activity and coloring book, and a lot of older people, adults, have been buying this book, which I think is interesting. But in the book, the illustrations are of different guides and of different archangels, and it really explains the hierarchy of, Bill,
I got my book.
and And basically what I did with the book, because I know that our ancestors act as our guides. So what I have done is put guides in almost every cultural background that you can imagine, so that people can understand that I don't care who you are or where you come from, your guides can represent different cultures as well. It's a fun book, and a lot of kids can learn about their angels and who they are, how to connect with them. So I had a lot
I
of fun doing it.
appreciate that, because when you buy a lot of, especially New Age stuff, you do not see representation of other cultures. It's starting to get a little bit better with like the oracle cards and stuff, but you don't see representation. So I like this. So that's one of her books. And then here's the other. Can you
Oh, no,
explain?
that's
Oh, this
that's
is the back.
that cover. But I have 3 ebooks that I'm publishing. I just download them as PDFs for people right now. And the series is called The Magic of You. You are your imagination creates your reality. You are a planet, a star, an entire universe, and you are infinite. You are an infinite being.
And where can they get the? Can they just purchase this on Amazon or no?
Well, they can go to my website, which is www.anchoredinspirit.com. They can email me if they would like copies as well. And my email is I'll say anchoredinspirit@gmail.com.
Oh, wait a minute. Anchored.
Inspirit@gmail.com.
Okay. I put that in the chat. Okay.
Okay, great. And you can buy the book on eBay as well.
eBay.
You can buy the Spirit Guide book on eBay as well.
All right. And then, so we don't have any takers to.
You want to do it?
Well, I don't know if I want to reveal so much, because it's really.
I do things in groups too. So sometimes when there's a group of friends get together, I do like groups from 5 to 10 people, and everybody gets a chance to find out a lot of things about themselves.
Okay, let me do something simple that doesn't go too in deep, because it does go deep. Okay. I've tried this with her a couple times, so.
What's your issue?
I don't know. What do I have? Let me see. Okay, money, because I had this on a past life, and I think I talked about it on my podcast, where my issue with money came from a past life where I was a wealthy, free Black man who were living, he was free during that enslavement time. And he owned a lot of property, a lot of land, and he had his own house, he had a business, and he took care of his family and was hung, right? Because the town men were, a lot of the poor whites were jealous. So he got hung. And every time I get close to making a lot of money, I used to sabotage. So that's the issue.
Okay. So give me one number, 1, 2, or 3. And it's the first number that comes up for you.
You said, what's the number from?
Number 1, 2, or 3. The first number that comes up for you. It got to be the first number. Don't think too hard. See it? Okay. So the theme around that is trust issues. If you're trusting yourself or trusting others, give me one number from 1 to 5.
For trusting others?
It could be trusting others or trusting yourself. But if you don't trust yourself, you don't trust others.
4.
Okay. And give me one number 1 to 4.
Between 1 to 4?
Yeah, 1 to 4. First number.
1.
So this energy is being stored in your heart. In your heart. Give me one number from 1 to 5.
3.
It's affecting the element of fire, and somewhere in yourself, you're feeling as though you're not deserving love. Okay, now let's go to your ancestors. Give me 3 numbers from 1 to 50.
1 to 50? 44.
2 more numbers.
Oh, 2 more?
Mm-hmm.
From 1 to 50.
Mm-hmm.
11 and 22.
So somewhere you have this particular issue is also within yourself, but it also has been passed down to you from your ancestors. There's something around commitment, vow, or promise, or an obligation that is happening with you right now.
Right in this current life and not a past life.
It happened. No, it happened with your ancestors, and that has been passed down to you through your genes. And
could
so
I have been the ancestor? Like, could it have been that past life?
Well, it could have been. It could have been that past life. Yes.
Because the last thought that I had when I did that quantum healing is, what's going to happen to my boys now? Because my boys were at school, and I was hung, and then they took his property, and he didn't know what was going to happen. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to connect it.
Also, and this could be a past life too, something around an inquisition. So.
Oh, like the Spanish Inquisition?
Yes, that has been passed down
and
to
guess
you.
What? I had a reading that I have been burned.
Okay.
Burned alive, yeah. More than once.
Okay. So this is how this works, basically, and you may have experienced some trauma. So give me one number from 1 to 42. One number.
17. Oh, one number? 17.
You're scared, right? You were molested in the past life.
Really?
Yeah, taken advantage of. You were taken advantage of in a past life. Give me one number 1 to 33.
I'm First number. First number 7.
Okay. Your greatest fear is rejection.
Yeah, I can see that, because I don't know if you guys do the Capucinian way. We have people who are physical suggestibles or extroverted. They feel things in their bodies, really, and that is one of the greatest fears that people who take in information like me, that they fear rejection, and it affects them severely.
And these numbers can go on and on and on, Renee. But the big and most beautiful thing about this is that all of these things can change through hypnosis.
Right.
So we're just going to reprogram the mind, and with other programming, and that will take away that programming, and we're going to replace it with new programming. And then you'll see some of your physical imbalances go away. Your physical disease. I mean, I've done this so many times with people, and the next day things are gone. It's so crazy.
So I could go out and buy my lottery ticket tomorrow, Jack. Okay, I'm just saying.
I had a friend who was suffering from eczema, and I've done this. I did this with her, and the next day it was gone.
Wow.
did the whole process with the numbers, and
Yeah,
then
because awareness,
mm-hmm.
you exposed it with the root, and then
It
it's
was
just
both the
gone.
root. We knew what to change,
Mhm.
and added on the hypnosis part to it, and yeah, it's just unbelievable how
Mhm.
this works, and you
And
can
just
see.
that and just that a past life can still be with you like it happened just yesterday. And it
Yes,
didn't matter if it was 5,000 years ago.
but
And
when
then
you do
not
have
just
that,
your stuff, but your ancestors' stuff too.
right? Oh,
So
and
it's
you
a
can change
lifelong
you can
thing.
change the whole when you do this work, and when you change that whole ancestral triggering, you could change it for generations. You know,
Right.
the
And I mean,
generations
I've
come
had several
won't take
sessions
anything.
working on myself, but it's like an unravel, it's a process. So, you know, but
Yeah,
I'm one of the people who are in the work that I'm working on myself too. So, you know, making sure I'm straight.
you know what? We are all working on ourselves, right?
Hmm.
Every day, me included. I work on myself all the time, all the time. I work on my thoughts. What am I thinking? And I change them. Anytime I get a negative thought in my mind, I change it. I wake up with a barrage of gratitude every day, just being thankful for everything in my life so that I can keep my vibration up. And it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but once you become more self aware, you become more self directed.
Yeah. And one thing that I always recommend and I practice is frequencies. I listen to frequencies at least 3 times a day, 3 times
Hmm.
a day. And especially prior, just before I do my self hypnosis, I have a program of self hypnosis that I use for myself. And I
Hmm.
use my frequencies first, and then I do that if you do it each day, you can reprogram and achieve what you want to achieve and accomplish.
Yes, you
So
can.
thank you. So Wanda, tell us about how we can, about your sessions and what you do. And do you do virtual sessions or
I do
in-person
virtual
sessions?
sessions. I do both in person and virtual sessions. They work both the same. And they generally are from an hour and a half to 2 hours. If it's a past life reading, then it will be much longer than that, maybe 2.5 to 3 hours. Um, so I do a number of different things that address issues like PSTD. Um, well, I am changing right now from because I was doing smoking cessation and weight loss and all of that. But I want to specialize more now on transformational things. So basically, I've come up with a what I call a transformational guide. It's a something that will allow me to look at all of your past experiences to understand what your purpose is in
Mhm.
life. There's a lot of people don't know what their purpose is. But this particular, or actually it's a grid. So I've kind of come up with this grid that I've been using to help people identify their purpose in life.
Okay, very good.
Mhm.
And then how can we reach you? I think you said anchored in spirit.
.com or
.com.
anchoredspirit@gmail.com.
Okay. But can they so when they go to your website, can they
They can call me as well.
oh, what's your phone number?
It's area code 415 760 7751.
Okay, and I'll put that in chat as well. Yeah, so thank you so much for enlightening us on the study of epigenetics and how trauma relates so much to our experiences today. Thank you so much. And any questions or comments from the audience before we take off today? And if you can think of any on the replay, just feel free to list the question there, and we'll make sure we respond to the question. All right. And for now, thank you so much for joining another Quintessential podcast. And feel free to make sure you like and share and subscribe to the YouTube channel or the Facebook page. And you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.